Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. We are moving into the month of July, and I'm always reminded of the path we may take each and every day. I'm reminded of the choices we make each and every day. There's a lot of external influences, a lot of external events that may be prompting or even motivating us to maybe make one choice versus another. To this, and some of those choices, the hardest one, especially as being an adult, is asking the three-word question that I need help. Today we have a new guest. His name is, I hope I say this right, Meiyoko
Yep,
Taylor.
Meiyoko.
Okay.
You got it.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight and joining us in the conversation.
You're welcome, man. It's good to be here, Robert. So I actually can't wait to actually dive into this.
So before I begin, I always put a disclaimer for those who are in the States. 988 is a suicide lifeline. I encourage you, whatever resources, whatever you're going through, find whatever. I don't like to reinvent the wheel. Whatever does work, whatever communities you're a part of, ask for help if you need it. But again, I just want to say, I just want to dive into it. I always say that people say it better than me. Nelson Mandela's been one of the things he used to say is, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. I think that's very powerful when you think about the choices you make every single day. Albert Einstein, another person that's notable for me, is peace cannot be kept by force. It only can be achieved by understanding. I want
That's
to
a good
just
one.
dive. I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on these two quotes before we go into other parts? What are your thoughts on the choices and just anything else you want to add to what I've already said so far?
Well, I think both of those quotes actually have one thing in common, and that's communication. I think
Mm-hmm.
communication is very important. You can communicate without force.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot understand without words. There's body language, but the aspect and the power of words and being able to communicate effectively can
Mm-hmm.
cause a shift, can cause transformation in one's mind, in one's body. So when it says peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding. You can't have any understanding without communicating. So um,
And
communication is important.
that takes a lot of like self-reflection. A lot of times we think about I always say that my thoughts, my actions, where I come from does not come from a vacuum. I have a culture, I have where I came from, how I was
Mhm,
brought up. So
mhm.
even when we're talking about communication, words mean different things. I can say a word
Absolutely.
and it may not mean the same thing to you at all. And then it's understanding that, also being able to communicate that. I think self-reflection and self-image is important. So if I don't feel well, a lot of times when cognitive behavioral theory, they say how we think is how we actually act, how we behave, or how we react to things.
Mhm.
So it's just if I feel pretty down and in the dumps, I'm gonna kind of reflect on how I communicate.
Absolutely.
So it's important to kind of just not assume just external, or I'm just gonna be happy even though I'm not really even diving into myself and any of my internal battles that I'm facing or I'm going through.
Mhm.
Anything you want to piggyback? I don't want to just go up. Anything that you thought that you experienced that has been helpful for you? I know we're going to ask later a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to, but before that, what has been helpful for you to communicate better? Let's start there.
I think as human beings, based on how our society is formulated now,
Mm-hmm.
we live in this hustle and grind culture. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's so funny. I was talking to one of my clients earlier about vulnerability and how people really perceive that to be. People don't want to be vulnerable. People don't want to tell people how they feel unless it's something positive or they feel like it's something cheerful. So what I've learned is that it's okay not to be okay. And I know it sounds cliche,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually being in touch with yourself and exactly how you feel. Because what's going to happen is nobody can read your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really knows what's going on in your mind, in your head, in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And how you feel inwardly is going to be a manifestation outwardly eventually. I mean, it's the way it always happens. This is why you see, certain people, they commit suicide and everybody around them is just like, I didn't see it coming. They just got this promotion. They just got this huge contract. And, I thought everything was going great. They had it made, wife, family, kids, or husband, kids. What happened? They had this internal war going on that nobody knew about.
I do appreciate you mentioning that, because a lot of times, I work in the mental health field, and I ask my clients, is it more important to look like you're doing well or actually doing well? That's like what a lot of times, especially in the mental health field, or when it comes to these battles, is more about what is better for you. Like your family could say, and they want you to do better. A lot of times there is support there, but what's better for them, what they think may be better for you may not be better for you at that time. And I remember this one, the looking glass self theory. Being in the church, I was a church leader and I still am, but I also remember just in the faith-based community, it's very important how you even, like, in the structure, and this does not proselytize those who are not faith-based. This is just a model. So if a person goes to church, a Christian church, and they see God as being vindictive, angry, vengeful, you're gonna the interesting thing is they're gonna treat their own congregation the same way. They're gonna treat everyone around them the same way. So how you see yourself is also the same thing. If you see yourself, if you in this theory is that we suggest ourself, like it says, suggest our own sense of self is based on the assessment of others, not ourselves. Right. So we can, and for that's that could be a dangerous thing, because you're no longer making choices based on your own needs or wants or desires. It becomes whatever one sees that's more important. And you kind of mentioned that with the promotion. You kind of and I feel one of the most interesting things I've noticed, even people with housing's a big issue. It's always been an issue in the States or whatnot. And I see families like, oh, I'm gonna get my son into an apartment, he'll get independence, and then get something. I remember working with a client. The person's like, I'm just gonna be miserable somewhere else. Independence may not be there yet. Maybe there's something else that So that's why this whole sense of self and understanding is very important. Any other thoughts when you think about this? Because I think this topic could unravel and unpack in various different ways. I'm going to also ask, after you mentioned a little bit, I'm going to ask what brought you to this, just to share with the listeners what you've been up to, what brings you into. But before that, any thoughts, anything you want to add to what we were even saying?
So one of the biggest problems in our society, and now it's become a global thing, is we base our self-worth on external things. Career, job, what people think, other people's perceptions, the media, what's popular.
Yeah.
So if we're not directly linked or doing well in any of these areas, we directly connect that back to what our worth as a person. And the amazing thing to me is that I feel like everybody's born with a unique genius. Most people they don't find it. But I feel like we all have God-given gifts and abilities that we are actually born with. Now, the problem is we focus so much on these external things, we lack the self-awareness to say, hey, what am I here to do? And not to just go all in depth about my purpose in life as a whole, but what about my purpose professionally? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I good at? What can I monetize? What type of problems can I solve with the gifts that I possess? And if people are wondering, well, I don't know what the world that is. Well, your genius and your gift usually lies between something that's easy to you and extraordinary to somebody else. It's usually that thing that we often take for granted and we're just doing, and everybody's like, oh my God, how do you do that? And we're like, oh man, it's nothing. I've been doing this for years. And they're looking at you like, this is amazing. Oh no, it's not. We downplay it. So first and foremost, it's about having that self-awareness and kind of seeing what you're made of.
Mm-hmm.
Not just your external things, your job. We get so caught up in roles that we have in like father, husband, wife, son, brother, sister. We get so caught up in these roles, and that's not who we are. Those are
Mm-hmm.
titles.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I may be a transformational coach and maybe a father, maybe a son, maybe a husband.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is those are all titles and roles that I do, but it's not Meiyoko.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think people lose sight of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not designed that way.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
happens if you're not filling these particular areas in your life, and I won't go spiritual, but I am a spiritual person. I'm actually, my father was a pastor.
Okay.
Yeah. It's when you have that void in your life,
Mm-hmm.
when you're not really feeding and nurturing who you are,
Mm-hmm.
what you're passionate about, and what's really important to you.
Mm-hmm.
What starts to happen is life starts to erode or starts to pull away the true essence of who you are. So now you lose identity.
Yeah.
So now it's like, I don't know who I am. And then you start to compare your external accomplishments or your external things to everybody else. So not only do I have no idea who I am, one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I'm not successful because I'm not accomplished in these external areas that I see broadcasted all over the media or social media. That's a whole nother animal, because social media has its good things, but in my opinion, it's taught people to hate themselves. It's a whole nother conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. I lost my identity, have no idea who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I am not achieving success in these particular external roles.
Yeah.
So what good am I?
Yeah.
Then that's when you start having the limiting beliefs. I'm no good. I'm worthless. It's hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
Now you start looking at your life situations that may not be that good.
Mm-hmm.
You continue to stay there, depression starts to set in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all along, life is going on around you.
Mm-hmm.
Family's thinking you're okay. It's all good. But in the inside, that part of you is dying. And this is like what slowly leads people down the path of giving up.
Yeah.
Because they don't see the aspect of self that's there, because they're so focused on what everybody else or everything else is perceived to be as the most important thing. And it's not.
Yeah. And I was thinking because I was watching this one actually it was on YouTube. There was this brilliant prodigy. He was born in 1895. I'm trying to find his name. He came from, I think, Russia or the Eastern. His family immigrated to the United States because of the hostilities of them being Jewish, and they came here. Their parents were, one of them was a actually psychiatrist, and they had this model of like making their son very smart. His IQ was off the charts. He was in Harvard at age 11, and I found this story very interesting because at the end of the story, at the end of his life, near the end of his life, he never wanted to even look at math anymore. He was brilliant at, he didn't even want to touch it. He actually got ill. He got physically and mentally ill just by even thinking about it. He actually told, I remember listening to it, it was just so astonishing that he told his aunt that he never would learn how to tie his shoelaces, never knew how to take care of himself.
Wow.
And it was just so on imbalanced because he and how the, even back then, how the public saw him, how they say, oh, this genius boy now is working menial jobs. He chose that because he doesn't want to do it anymore. And like, I know this is a very outlier kind of extreme kind of case, but when we think about it, like you're mentioning, when we're doing everything for everyone else,
Right.
It becomes maybe a smaller version of that, but it can be as damaging if you really think about it.
Absolutely.
Robert Fitz kind of says it this way: if you limit your choices only to what seems possible or reasonable, you disconnect yourself from what you truly want, and all that is left is compromise. All we do is, like, we live in a world that is was it convenience? That's the thing. Like everything has tiers, everything has convenience. It's like, well, let's avoid every single discomfort. Discomfort sometimes allows us to deeper sense of understanding, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're just, it shouldn't, how we should everything. This shouldn't be this way. This shouldn't be that way.
Right.
Well, what do you want? What is better for you? What is success
Exactly.
for you? Like, is it, success for you may not be us, there's so many intangible things, not just making money. It's also just time. Maybe you want to spend more time with your family. Maybe you just want to have more freedom in your work life, or whatever that may be. Is subjected by what you yourself want, and that's going to take time, and all that stuff. But before we get into that, I want to get to know you. You're new to the podcast. Those who are listening, just share what brought you to this area of coaching. What brought you to, a lot of people, it's unfortunately unorthodox for people to focus on this type of, because they're like, well, all I do is grind. Like, I hustle and I make it. Especially depending on what culture you are. Like, I don't deal with that. This is what my father did. This is what my grandfather did, and that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But what changed for you? Why do you think choices are so important?
To kind of get back to where I am now, it was burnout. I probably burnt out, 2-3 times. And the reason why I burnt out is because I was mentally, physically, and emotionally pushing myself towards something that I thought would make me happy, that would make me feel accomplished. But the reality of it is, all that time I was neglecting the things that are really important to me. Wanted to work with Les Brown, was able to work with Les Brown. Wanted to become a best-selling author, became a best-selling author. Wanted to work with certain public figures, made a little bit of money, did all these things, but at the same time, it never changed how I felt. And I remember achieving some of these goals, and I'm just like, I don't feel any different. And now I'm at the point where I'm tired, and you're looking back, and your personal relationships are strained. You don't feel really good about yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And you kind of think about, and you start to ask yourself, like, what's missing? And what I found is that the majority of people base success on being one-dimensional. And what I mean by one-dimensional is that we look at success as having money, material things, being popular or known in our industry, and everybody liking us, having the acceptance and approval of everyone else. What we don't realize is none of that has absolutely anything to do with us.
Yeah.
And what happens is you'll find that people can change your opinion of you very quickly. You can lose money overnight. And you can be well known and seen all over the place. But at the end of the day, none of those people are coming home with you.
Yeah.
It is going to be whatever you choose to come home with or come home to. And if you haven't been really focusing on those particular things, you may not have anything to come home to.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much make that realization. And then my father being diagnosed with cancer, strained personal relationships in my life, becoming a father. I have a 3-year-old daughter. So it's just a lot of different things that took place in the span of the last 3 or 4 years. And it really caused me to take a step back and say, hey, what's really important here? I often tell people God first and foremost. But after that, okay, it's family, and then it's business. And sometimes we'll tell ourselves, oh, I'm going to hustle. The wife or the husband, they'll be okay. I'm just going to grind it out. I'm going to focus. And focusing is great. There's a time and a place to actually focus on what you need to do.
Yeah.
But if it comes at the expense of your family, your faith, your health, and your finances, it's probably not going to be worth it. And
No.
I'm not saying you can't. I'm not going to say you don't put any skin in the game and invest in your business or invest in yourself.
No.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you potentially put all those things in jeopardy, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, those are the things that are the most important in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else is going to be that much more important. You can always get cars. Well, even money. You can always get money. Learn a skill, high income skill. You can always develop money. You won't always have a father.
Yeah.
And that's something that I can actually say. Would I have thought that my father would pass last 9/11? Absolutely not. He was 74. He was fairly healthy.
Mm-hmm.
God decided that he had other plans.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that to say you want to be able to focus on the things that are most important to you in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an important thing. But I spent a lot of time focusing on the vision and, the goals and all those things I wanted to accomplish. And me and my dad had a very, very close relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Traveled all over the country with him as he preached and things like that. So I'm not saying we had a bad relationship. We had an amazing relationship. What I'm saying is we don't know how long we have to be able to be with or to do the things that we love.
Yeah.
That's what's important. And if anybody can, if listening to this, I can't stress that enough. Prioritize that first. And then all the other stuff will fall in place.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, there's a lot of intangible values that we don't notice every day. Our time.
Every day. We take for granted.
Exactly. You were mentioning just the popularity. One thing that, haunts me when I think about is Robin Williams. I remember growing up with Robin Williams.
Very good example.
He has a quote. He says, I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make me feel alone. So the proximity of just having people around you is not always connecting. It's not always really finding that. So like you said, I do want to say sorry for your loss. I'll say that right now. Okay. When I think one of the things I want to think about loss is it's never the funeral that's hard, it's the day after. It's the Monday after. It's
the funeral was a little rough. It was the fact that, man, he's not walking through that door anymore.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, and even now, man, it's almost like yesterday happened.
Yeah.
And I used to hear people say that all the time, like, oh man, it's just like yesterday. You don't understand that until you lose a parent. So when it comes to Robin Williams, I would love to ask him. Obviously, I can't. Why did he feel alone? What wasn't being communicated to him? He felt disconnected. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
He felt disconnected from his family.
Yeah. From everyone around him.
Around him, right.
And I think we talk about self reflection. Last month was post-traumatic stress awareness month, and one thing about that I reading and also seeing some quotes, obviously veterans a lot of times, one thing that was haunting, and just paraphrasing, person says, I'm tired of the human gestures I do every day. I'm still in Afghanistan. You know what I mean? So so it's not like he's here, but he's just going through the motions. So understand, that's a lot more complex. Obviously, getting the help is important, but I do say, even me working in the mental health field, I would say my family's so important. I could not do what I'm doing without my family. I couldn't do what I'm doing coming home. I even tell my wife, when I get closer, sometimes there's rough days. You can't help everyone. What I realize is a lot of times people coming into my office are trying to save the world, but not themselves. And I'm trying to say, when is there room for so-and-so? When is there room for you? You're like, well, this person, like, when is there time for you to have some, you take care of your needs, your wants, what you need to have happen. And sometimes they get stuck. Sometimes, a lot of times, when it comes to choices, we talk about making bad choices or maybe some wise choices. How about making no choices? Jim Rohn says you can't make progress without making a decision. You're just sitting there. I don't know. I'm just gonna let it slide. Another one, William James says. He says, when you have to make a choice and don't make it, that itself is a choice. A lot of times we
And
don't
that
even
is
say it.
so dangerous.
Yeah.
Like
So,
that, making no choice is a choice. That is so powerful. That's a powerful statement.
yeah. So, going back to choice, and obviously, I do appreciate you sharing your story. And again, and I always commend a lot of my guests coming on these topics. Even though they come off, choices doesn't seem apparently that deep, but when you think about it, is the foundation to where we end up, what we want to do, who we surround ourselves with, and what we find is important. Is it important for me to be better or look better, like seem better, or actually be better? What is better for me, and that kind of concept? So why do you think making choices is important, especially today? COVID is sort of gone. Let's just say that. So what would you say, especially now, because I think communication has, at least from my circles, has worsened. There's been like
Oh yeah,
3 years that
yeah.
people have been kind of locked away, and
Mhm.
you see family gatherings are people with their phones just sitting around, not
Right,
even talking.
right.
So why do you think making choices is especially important today, as we kind of step out to this new kind of, well, from your experience?
Well, I think if you don't make
Mm-hmm.
a choice will be made for you. And
Mm-hmm.
here's what I mean. When COVID kind of died down,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people were shaken up. You were going outside, you say hi to people, and people were like,
Mm-hmm.
very, very disconnected from everybody else because they had to learn to
Mm-hmm.
function in a certain manner. Even me myself, I was very, before COVID, did a lot of networking events, was very social. I actually find myself having to force myself sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
to actually go out and to interact with people. And it's because you were in an environment for so long. So if you don't make the choice to kind of revert back to society and to integrate yourself into society,
Mm-hmm.
and let me just back up, because I think COVID also, it brought awareness to the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs shut down, people were out of work, so they were forced
Mm-hmm.
to make a choice. Either I'm going to try to find work somewhere else, I'm going to really find what I'm good at, find what I'm passionate about. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of businesses were started, a lot of entrepreneurs were created,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't go back to work. They have successful, thriving business. Other people went back to work. Some people were stuck in a depression.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health work went through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
My therapist, he was just like, I'm booked.
Mm-hmm.
I can't handle anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So choices are important, because what COVID did is it kind of put a different stage
Mm-hmm.
available to people now.
Mm-hmm.
You can either continue to be like that, be stuck and be isolated,
Mm-hmm.
have that certain mentality, or you can actually start to come out of that particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why mental health, the mental health aspect is just so huge now.
Yeah.
It magnified problems that we were already having before COVID.
Yeah.
Spouses had to spend a lot of time together, and some of them, a great deal of them, divorced.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, some spouses were brought closer together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think choices are always important, but I'll say you have to make a choice at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, life is going to make a choice for you, because it doesn't slow down for anybody.
Nah.
I'll say, people say time doesn't wait for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Life doesn't wait for anybody.
Yeah. A lot of times there might be a life event, or someone's I'm working with is going through a lot. I mean, people feel overwhelming, but sometimes the most encouraging thing is that things continue to change no matter what. So like sometimes they're like, I'm at this point. I'm like, I can't go lower than where I'm at. And change is scary, but at the same time, it can be encouraging, especially if you're in that pit. If you know, and like sometimes they're like, oh, and people who are afraid of change. I'm like, well, no, I like sports, so it's kind of funny. So if there's no change, then whoever won the Super Bowl, whoever won the NBA Finals, always won that NBA Finals, and I don't
Right.
think a lot of people will be happy about that. So,
Well, but I mean, change is not supposed to be fun.
no.
This is what we don't realize. We expect change to be so pleasant and such a great experience, but usually we change when something is associated with pain.
Yeah.
We don't really say, "Oh my God, this is so pleasurable. It makes me want to change."
Yeah.
No, that's usually what has us comfortable.
Yeah.
We change when it's just like, "Ouch, that hurts." Wait a second, this hurts a lot.
Yeah.
I've got to do something about this.
Yeah. And so, like at the moment, obviously with changes, there is discomfort. And like like I said earlier, when we run away from the discomfort, when everything is about a general statement, what should have happened, instead of just really taking the time of understanding. And one thing I want to share with you is Kaplan. I love what he says here. Is that we are so desperate to be understood, and that's not bad. But he says we forget to be understanding. It's a two-way street, because if you understand, if you don't, the moment of you understanding yourself is important, but also understanding your surroundings will help you navigate and adapt to the surrounding environment. It's not saying that you don't want to have that connection. You're gonna have those few people that are close to you that can understand you more. But what I'm trying to say, that's not the priority. If you're especially trying to navigate this world is sometimes very unforgiving. Life continues to change. So if you're going to go blind with a hammer every single time you have a problem, it may not go well. You may have to understand other communities, other situations. Aristotle says it this way: those who know do, and those who understand teach. I think it's very important that we understand that there is this progress. I'm like, I try to, whatever I learned or whatever I experienced, just like you were doing, you're sharing it because it does help another person. One thing, when I was really struggling earlier, like about a decade ago or so, I remember just saying, helping other became my healing. Serving was my recovery. And, that in itself kind of propagated where I am today. I love what I do. I love doing this podcast. I love connecting and hearing other people's perspective, because I know that this conversation, for me, the most important thing is that it continues. That is the goal. That it continues. The discussion continues. The rightness is not so important. Like, I love the people get so stuck on the rightness. I think it's really about us continuing the conversation. When it gets quiet, I get nervous. Yeah.
Without question.
I have two questions. One, and then the final thoughts. What has helped you? What has helped and not helped you in making some of the hardest decisions in your life, especially, let's say, you said a lot of things happened in the last 3 years. So what helped?
I want to say first. I'm going to say first and foremost, God. That's it. My Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I have to say that because I just have to say that. So that, and really having an awareness of myself, what I needed and what was best for me and my family.
Yeah.
Even when others can't see what's best for me and my family.
Yeah. I think that's knowing that you're on your time. Does that make sense? Like, it's your time.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not this, like, a lot of times we have this blind urgency where, like, some other person's clock, I'm like, throw away that clock. It's your time. What do you do with it? So anyway, continue.
Time is good. I mean, you said so many things, man. We could have talked about so much stuff. One thing I will mention about time, and this may hit a little home for some people, but stop saying, if only I had more time.
Yeah.
What you're really saying to yourself
Mm-hmm.
is my time management stinks.
Yeah.
And what you're also saying to yourself is my self-management stinks.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people it goes back to self-management, because if you connect to your values, your beliefs, and your principles, and you start to live life with intention,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll start to have time to do those other things, because those things will become important to you. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is we don't have enough awareness to sit down and say, hey, what are my values? What are my
Mm-hmm.
principles? What are my beliefs? What are
Mm-hmm.
my boundaries?
Yeah.
A lot of us have very, very poor boundaries, and boundaries are something you have to consistently reinforce, because people will try to break them all the time.
Yeah.
So,
And
so yeah, I got a whole thing with time. You're about to make me go in a
yeah,
whole different direction.
no. And I feel like with boundaries, no is a complete sentence. No is a complete sentence. We have porous boundaries. I know with time management. You mentioned your therapist. I work in the mental health field, and I know that it is. If I don't, that's one skill I've learned very well now. Is because
Excellent.
you cannot, not having a. There's 24 hours in the day. There's no more.
We
You
all get the
can't clone it.
same.
And the funny thing is, a lot of times with time management is just being able to say no when you can't.
Yep.
Not knowing your limits. And I think I say this a lot. I used to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but also in fighting, right? In general. A good fighter knows their limits, knows where the weakness
Absolutely.
is, and it's not that they're the strongest. I feel that's too basic. It's just that you is that they learn, and they learn what their strengths are and the weaknesses, and then they also use that to do better in the fight and hopefully succeed. And I think that in life is the same way. We're not awesome at everything. Let's just stop it. We're not awesome at everything.
Right.
So
Right. And I don't want to be.
I don't want, that's overwhelming. And at the same time, I think it sends a I love comedy, and part of the thing about comedy is it embraces humanity. We're exceptional and unimpressive at the same time sometimes as human beings. So I think if we're sometimes when we embrace our humanity, that we do make mistakes, but we shouldn't shy away from it. The work is hard means that the work needs to be done. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
So
You
any
got
final
it.
thoughts would you want to share with those listening today?
I think I just want to tell everybody, no matter what you're thinking, no matter how you're feeling, whether you're happy and joyful, or you feel like you're at your last leg and you're down in the dumps, the more you know yourself and the more you know what you want, out of life and what you want to accomplish, the better you're actually going to feel. A lot of the times depression and things like that comes from a lack of clarity. You're unsure about your identity. You're unsure about your self-worth and your purpose. You are somebody. You are priceless. Just the fact that you are born is a miracle, for one. And two, if you're worried about making your mark and your purpose in the world, start tapping into what's really important to you. Spend some time with yourself.
Yeah.
You spend so much time with everything and everyone else. Spend some time with you.
Yeah.
Stop running. I posted a quote on social media, and I said, we're too busy trying to outwork our emotions and to outperform our unhappiness. Stop running.
Yeah.
So that's my message. Stop running.
Yeah.
Stop running and start to focus on you and what it is that your mind, your spirit, your body is telling you. And then start to give it what it needs.
I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and sharing with this discussion. Everything. I guess your website, whatever you're into, I'll put in the plugs into the notes so anyone listening could click and learn more about what you're doing. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And as I want to say, also remember, stay updated with all things Revive Ministries, the various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. I love this quote. I want to sit here and kind of think about this last quote. I use a lot of them, but it's John A. Shedd. He said, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for."
Love it.